Stone Age. Humanity's first weapons were not invented. They were found. A heavy stone, a sharpened flint, a dense piece of wood. These required no design and no manufacturing, yet experimental archaeology has confirmed that stone clubs and hand axes could fracture skulls and cause fatal wounds with a single well-placed strike. Close range, however, was the limitation, and that constraint pushed early humans towards something better. The spear solved that problem. Wooden shafts tipped with shaped stone or bone points gave early humans both reach and range. You could thrust with a spear in a close-quarter struggle or hurl it from a distance. It was purpose-built for killing in a way that a found rock was not, and it remained the dominant weapon of the Stone Age for hundreds of thousands of years. Then came the bow. Developed sometime in the Upper Paleolithic, tens of thousands of years ago, the bow worked by storing energy in a bent length of wood and releasing it through a string. A well-aimed arrow could bring down large game or kill a human opponent before they ever came within arm's reach. Range became the great equalizer, and the bow held that status for thousands of years across every inhabited continent. Bronze Age. When metalworking emerged around 3300 BC, it did not immediately replace what came before. The composite bow reached its deadliest form during the Bronze Age. Built from layers of wood, horn, and animal sinew laminated together under compression, it could launch arrows with far greater force and range than any weapon that preceded it. Horse archers equipped with composite bows could ride into range, loose a volley, and be gone before infantry could respond. Bronze also produced the sword as a practical battlefield weapon. The Egyptian khopesh, a curved single-edged bronze blade, became one of the defining weapons of the era. Its curved profile allowed it to hook around shields and reach targets that a straight blade could not easily engage. The chariot represented the era's most dramatic force multiplier. At the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC, the Hittite and Egyptian armies together fielded an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 chariots, making it the largest chariot engagement in recorded history. These were light, horse-drawn platforms built to carry archers armed with composite bows across open ground at speed. The chariot and the composite bow were not separate innovations. They were a system, and together they made each other significantly more lethal. A crew that could loose arrows at full gallop and wheel away before the enemy could close had an almost insurmountable tactical advantage against infantry in open terrain. Middle Ages. Strip away the mythology of the medieval period, and what remains is a sustained arms race between armor and the weapons built to defeat it. Plate armor improved to the point where a fully equipped knight was nearly impervious to conventional weapons at range. The English longbow was the answer. Standing 6 to 7 feet in length, with draw weights often exceeding 100 pounds, and some specialized warbows reaching up to 180, the English longbow fired arrows capable of penetrating mail armor, exploiting gaps in plate, and delivering lethal force at 300 yards. At Agincourt in 1415, an English force heavily outnumbered by French men-at-arms deployed longbowmen in flanking positions along a narrow field. The arrows came down in such volume that the French advance collapsed before it reached the English line. When the decisive engagement moved behind walls, the calculus changed. Siege warfare demanded a different category of weapon entirely, and the counterweight trebuchet was the answer. Capable of hurling stones weighing around 190 pounds across distances of 600 to 900 feet, with enough force to crack fortifications, the trebuchet made no wall entirely safe. The Byzantine Empire contributed one of the most psychologically effective weapons of the entire medieval world. Greek fire was a liquid incendiary compound, likely derived in part from petroleum-based substances, projected through ship-mounted siphons during naval engagements. When it struck, it ignited on contact and continued burning even on water. Enemy crews could not extinguish it by conventional means. The Byzantines treated the formula as a state secret, restricting knowledge to tightly controlled circles across generations, and the original formula has never been conclusively recovered. Early modern gunpowder era. Gunpowder changed who could use weapons and who held power as a result. The technology originated in China with the fire lance, a spear fitted with a tube of gunpowder attached near the shaft. When ignited, it discharged flame and fragments at close range over a distance of roughly 10 feet. Crude by any later standard, but it was the direct ancestor of every firearm that followed. By the 14th century, metal-barreled cannons had arrived in Europe. Early bombards were enormous and difficult to move, but they could launch stone or iron balls weighing hundreds of pounds over distances of approximately 1 mile. Every castle, every walled city, every fortification in Europe had been designed around the assumption that thick stone walls were effectively permanent. Cannons made that assumption obsolete. Handheld firearms followed. The arquebus and then the musket, using matchlock and later flintlock mechanisms, could drive a lead ball through a target at ranges exceeding 100 yards. By the 17th century, massed musket volleys had replaced the longbow as the primary means of killing across open ground. Gunpowder shifted the balance of power from the strongest warrior on the field to the state that could manufacture, supply, and coordinate killing at industrial scale. World War I. From this point forward, the pace of change accelerates beyond any previous era. Individual conflicts defined the periods better than broad ages did, and the First World War announced that shift immediately. Artillery dominated the Western Front in a way that no previous weapon had dominated any battlefield. More than 58% of British casualties were caused by shellfire. Heavy guns bombarded trench lines continuously, destroyed fortifications, cut barbed wire, and produced industrialized killing at a scale that had no historical precedent. The machine guns sealed the advantage for the defense. The Vickers machine gun could sustain approximately 600 rounds per minute, with water cooling that prevented the overheating that had plagued earlier rapid-fire designs. At combat ranges of around 1,000 yards, it was deadly accurate against formed infantry, and with indirect plunging fire, it could reach targets over 3 miles away. The result was a stalemate that lasted years, not months. Poison gas introduced a new category of suffering. Mustard gas, first deployed in 1917, caused severe chemical burns to expose skin, the lungs, and the eyes, and could persist in low-lying areas for days after dispersal. The United States Army alone recorded over 70,000 gas casualties during the war. World War II. If the First World War industrialized killing, the Second World War mechanized and extended it far beyond the front line. Distance no longer guaranteed safety, and entire civilian societies were drawn into the logic of total war. Strategic bombing was the clearest expression of the shift. Air power extended the principle of artillery, destroying what the enemy needed to fight, to a continental scale. Factories, rail yards, power plants, ports, and residential housing were all treated as legitimate military targets on the assumption that civilian industry and morale were inseparable from military capacity. The Allied bombing campaign against Germany killed an estimated 600,000 civilians and left millions homeless across the continent. In the Pacific, the effects were even more concentrated. The B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced strategic bomber of the war, carried the firebombing campaign to Japan. On the night of March 9th to 10th, 1945, a force of B-29 struck Tokyo, creating a firestorm that killed approximately 100,000 people, destroyed roughly a quarter of the city, and remains the deadliest conventional air raid in recorded history. Then came the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, a single B-29 bomber released a uranium bomb over Hiroshima. The explosion released energy equivalent to approximately 15 kilotons of TNT. The blast wave flattened most structures within a 1-mile radius, and an estimated 80,000 people were killed within the first hours. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing tens of thousands more. The 2 atomic bombings killed an estimated 150,000 to 250,000 people in total, more than any single weapon deployment before or since. Cold War. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world understood exactly what nuclear weapons could do. Both superpowers then spent the next 4 decades building more of them and significantly more powerful ones. The Soviet Tsar Bomba, tested on October 30th, 1961, over the Novaya Zemlya archipelago in the Arctic, produced a yield of approximately 50 megatons. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima had a yield of approximately 15 kilotons. The Tsar Bomba was more than 3,000 times more powerful. Had it been detonated over a city, it would have vaporized everything within tens of miles and caused fatal burns at distances far beyond that. By the height of the Cold War, both superpowers had deployed thermonuclear warheads on intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching any target on Earth in approximately 30 minutes. Nuclear submarines carried missile payloads that could be launched from concealed positions anywhere in the ocean, making a truly disarming first strike essentially impossible to guarantee. What the Cold War ultimately produced was not a new category of weapon, but a new category of deterrence. The deadliest weapons in human history were built, refined, and deployed on the understanding that they could never actually be used. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and drop a comment. See you on the next one.